Alrighty, my name is Alyssa Silva, and I am here with Wisdom Center's AJU Open, and we are so excited to have you for our fabulous Hanukkah class today with Rabbi Jonathan Leeener. A little bit about Rabbi Jonathan before I let him take it away, but he's the head rabbi of the Prospect Heights Shul, faculty fellow at Pardes Institute of Jewish Studies, and the founder of BASE, which is one of my personal favorite Jewish organizations out there, which brings Jewish homes that are run by rabbinic families around Jewish young adults across the U.S. He received his rabbinic ordination from Yeshivat Chovevei Torah and is currently pursuing a master's degree in Holocaust and Genocide Studies at Yeshiva University. So without further ado, we want to have all the Hanukkah wisdom from you. Rabbi Leeener, please take it away.
Okay, thank you for having me. I wish I was in sunny Los Angeles. I'm in cold Brooklyn, but that's what it is. I'm really excited to learn together for the next 45 minutes or so. The class I put together before I shared my screen was an attempt to look at the laws surrounding Hanukkah, the halachot, and use that as a way to get to Hanukkah's larger message. Some backstory into that. When I was in rabbinical school, you obviously study a lot of Jewish law. And when I was in school, if I'm being honest, I had a very difficult time continually learning halakha. And eventually I had to come to terms this was what rabbis do. They learn Jewish law. And I made a paradigm shift in terms of seeing it differently. And instead of just seeing it as legality, I tried my best to see it as guideposts to much larger ideas. And obviously, I'm not the first person to think of it, but once I made that shift, it had a profound impact on my learning, on my teaching, and I'm hoping to weave that through. So we're going to start off deep in the weeds of ideas and laws around Hanukkah. And then by the end, we're going to branch out to see not just larger themes of Hanukkah, but larger themes and mission statements of the Jewish people. So with that, I'm going to share my screen here. And of course, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat and I'll do my best to address them as they come up. So if you see here, I'm sure many people are familiar with this photograph taken in 1931 in Germany with the menorah overlooking the streets, and you obviously see the Nazi flag in the background. I've always connected a lot to this image, but post October 7th, I've really seen it in a new light in terms of thinking about Hanukkah as a holiday centered around Jewish pride and publicly displaying that. And I thought it was important to bring that into our conversation today as we start our learning. So with that, let's get to it. So I want to start off with this quote by Louis Ginsburg as a way to frame our larger conversation around Jewish law and themes. So he says, it's only in the halakha, so in the Jewish law, that we find the mind and character of the Jewish people exactly and adequately expressed. I'll read it one more time because it's short, but it's profound. It is only in the halakha that we find the mind and the character of the Jewish people exactly and adequately expressed. In other words, when you study Jewish law, according to Louis Ginsburg, it's going to give you a very clear indication how Jews throughout history have wanted to express not only the way they want to live, but the ideas that they want to share with the world. In essence, saying that we're not just participating in formal legalistic tendencies, rituals, but those rituals serve a much larger purpose in expressing our core ideas as Jewish people. So with that, I want to go right into it. This is the laws surrounding Hanukkah, and I'll read it for us here. It says, one needs to be very diligent in kindling the Hanukkah lights. Even a poor man living off of charity must lend or sell his clothes and buy oil to kindle with. Right? So the law is saying, as an opening statement, if you didn't think Hanukkah was a serious holiday, maybe they're acknowledging the fact that Hanukkah is a rabbinic holiday, right? Along with Purim, that people may not give it the attention it deserves. Obviously, now in America, it probably gets more important than a lot of biblical holidays. But putting that aside, that's what he's coming to address. He's saying, don't overlook Hanukkah, right? Even though there aren't so many mitzvot associated with it, even though it's a rabbinic holiday, which doesn't have the same magnitude and weight as, let's say, Passover, the Shulchan Aruch, Rabbi Yosef Karo, is saying don't sleep on it. And so that alone is a very important statement, and I'll come back to it. But just to add more significance to how important Hanukkah is, he says even a poor man living in charity must sell their clothes to be able to buy oil so that they can light the Hanukkah candles. So if you know anything about Judaism's laws surrounding charity, tzedakah, you would know that they take it of extreme importance, right? And the fact that they would be advocating or even demanding people who need tzedakah to use that so that they can fulfill the mitzvah should show you that they are not joking around. I don't even have better words than that, right? Meaning this is so significant, right? Even though we take the mitzvah of tzedakah so seriously, it's almost intrinsic to being a human being or a Jew that you need to get it. So just so you know how rare these statements are, and I underlined it, there's only two places in all of Jewish law that Rabbi Yosef Karo, the Shulchan Aruch, says you need to be very diligent. Two places, right? And if I could see everyone and take questions, I would love to open it up, and maybe people could put it in there in the chat what they think the two other places in Jewish law that he says that you need to be diligent in. And also this idea of a poor person needing to also participate financially in a mitzvah also only comes up two times. So to me, alarm bells should be going off, right? If you're looking into this and you say, oh my God, there are hundreds, thousands of, with rabbinic laws included, examples that they could use, and that there's only two or four in this case would seem to indicate that something really important is trying to be expressed here, mainly lighting the Hanukkah candles and celebrating Hanukkah. So, so if you want to guess, put it in the chat now. Otherwise, I'm going to spill the beans here. So the examples are: one needs to be very diligent regarding the blessings of the Torah. Oh, here, I can see people now in the chat. Making a joyous wedding. Okay, that was a good guess. I love that. Lulav and Etrog, very good, Daniel Shayat, my former Klavruta. A joyous bris. All good ones. None of them correct, unfortunately, but good guesses. So one, you need to be very diligent around the blessings of the Torah. this is referring to the blessings before you learn Torah. Every morning it's in the Siddur. They're saying don't overlook it. So this is a good reminder. If you don't have a custom of saying that, this would be a good reminder to make sure you do. But I see this in saying blessing the Torah is of extreme importance, right? So you're already putting the mitzvah of lighting candles on the same level as blessing the entire Torah. So if I was trying to exaggerate, and maybe I will here, you're equating lighting the Hanukkah candles to the whole Torah as a whole. So that's one. The second one is actually a 10 commandment, right? Which is, you can't get much better than that in terms of a list of importance. One needs to be very diligent regarding honoring and revering their father and mother. So anyone with complicated relationships with their parents, this is also a good reminder to its importance. In other words, Hanukkah candles can be equated to the entire Torah as a whole and to one of the 10 commandments. So it's a central pillar, right? It's saying, do not sleep on this mitzvah, right? And I know I'm repeating myself, but it's really important to say this, even though it's a rabbinic holiday, right? And there are the other rules surrounding the holiday aren't as intense as even Shabbat, right? You can use electricity on Hanukkah, you can drive your car, you can do all of these things. Don't sleep on Hanukkah. Something awesome is happening here. And we know that because the only two examples in all of Jewish law where it says to be careful are pretty central ideas as the Torah and honoring your father and mother. In terms of this requirement for the poor to be involved, meaning that even somebody who receives charity needs to invest and spend their own money to fulfill their requirement. There's only two other examples, again, in all of Jewish law that would require that to happen. And they are, and somebody actually answered it very good. I'll start with what somebody said, which is around Passover, right? A filu ani, so even a poor person who is sustained through charity must sell his clothing or rent himself in order to buy wine for the 4 cups. So if somebody, God forbid, is in a, let's call it a welfare state where they need to be reliant on the community to live, even with that, they need to be able to participate in the Passover Seder in drinking the 4 cups of wine. Now, you could say like, oh, that seems ridiculous and that's unfair. How could you make somebody do that? Legitimate argument. The other argument you could say is actually it's a profound statement by the rabbis to say, hey, you know what? If you aren't participating in the Seder, you are being excluded from the Jewish people and the Jewish experience. In other words, this is central to what it means to be a Jew, that you need to have your own skin in the game to participate in it. I think it also is somewhat humanizing in the fact that you're buying in yourself in many ways, but it's saying you can't be included in the Jewish people without participating fully in this mitzvah. So we need you to be a part of it. Again, I think it's also would be saying the same thing for Hanukkah, right? So central is celebrating Hanukkah and joining all the Jews around the globe in celebrating and lighting the menorah that you too need to even contribute. I wouldn't see it as a over overreaching demand of the poor. I would actually see it as a gift, right? And actually really empowering to them. And then in a really kind of radical, subversive way, the other example of when poor people have to perform a mitzvah and use their own money is for tzedakah, meaning every poor person also has to give tzedakah. And the Shulchan Aruch codifies this as Jewish law, saying every person is obligated to give charity. Even a poor individual who relies on charity must give from what they receive. So no one is exempt from giving tzedakah, which I take as, again, I'm reading it in a positive way versus it being overreaching, is saying it's intrinsic to what it means to be a Jew, to be able to participate in the mitzvah of giving to others, even if you yourself are reliant on others for your own sustainability. I would also say it's intrinsic to what it means to be a human being, right? It's actually, I think the rabbis are restoring their own kavod habriot, their own sense of self-worth, as a way of, this is what it means to be a human being, is to be able to give to another human being. And while certainly it's going to be taxing for you to give, the positives of it restoring your own dignity by being able to participate in giving will offset the cost. So this is a long way of me saying the laws of Hanukkah, even from the way beginning, right? Even just reading this very first rule is going to indicate that this holiday, despite it being very family friendly and joyous, is a really significant holiday that we don't want anyone to miss out on. And we're even going to go to the extreme of saying to people who are reliant on charity that they too need to buy into it. So again, this is the rabbis really driving home its importance. Let me go now to our main text here. So this is from the Talmud. Ironically, the Talmud, which is, I don't know, I think it's 1,700 pages. For those who do Daf Yomi, who study a page of Talmud a day, it takes 7.5 years if you're studying one page every day. So it's vast. The laws of Hanukkah fit onto one page. I actually think it's on a half of one page. So really reflect on that, right? How important Hanukkah has become within like Jewish people, yet within the Talmud itself, it occupies half of a page of 1,700. But buried in there, again, if you're a close reader of the text, you're going to see that while it's only mentioned really one or two times, it has extreme significance in terms of what it's asking, and it's distinct really from almost every other mitzvah commandment that we do. So I'm going to walk you here through this piece of Talmud. And again, if you have questions, feel free to put it in there into the chat. Tanu Rabbanan, it's taught in a Braita. Mitzvah de Chanukah, the mitzvah of Hanukkah is ner ish ubeito. The minimum requirement, and people are often shocked when they hear this, the minimum requirement for participating in the mitzvah of Hanukkah is lighting one candle every single night, right? Meaning, even on the 8th night of Hanukkah, you could fulfill your requirement by lighting only one candle, right? And not just you but the whole household, right? So let's say you have 5 people in a house, one person lighting one candle throughout the whole holiday. That is sufficient. But they go on to say, umahadrin, but those who really want to go to another level observing the holiday, ner lechol echad ve'echad. Every single person in the household should light their own candle. Meaning, on the first night of Hanukkah, you have a household of 5 people. Everyone in the house is lighting one candle. That would be the case for the second night. Second night, everyone also still lighting one candle, and that would go all the way through, right? So we're still not to where we really participate, how we practice the holiday. And it says, umahadrin mina mahadrin. But those who really, just want to go all the way with Hanukkah, this is what you need to do. In good Jewish form, there's a disagreement how you do it. The House of Shammai, Beit Shammai, says what you do is the first day, Yom Rishon, Madlik Shmona. So the first night you actually light 8 candles. I kind of want to try that one year, even though we don't practice that. I feel like that would be an interesting experience. So the first night you light 8, Mikan ve'elech pochet v'holech. And then every subsequent night you would take one away, meaning the last night of Hanukkah, you would only have one candle. Okay? That would be, let's call it the countdown method. In general, Jewish law does not like counting down. 2 examples of us counting up, which is, the opinion that we follow, and the Beit Hillel opinion. For the Omer, right, in between Passover and Shavuot, we count 49 days. And interestingly enough, we don't count down, right, like many people will do all around the world in a couple of weeks for the secular New Year, right, 10, 9, 8. We actually, on the first night of the Seder, is night 1, and we count up. Another example is the days of the week in the Jewish calendar is Yom Rishon, Yom Sheni, and we count up to Shabbat, right? So even though Shabbat is like the culmination of the week, and it would make sense for that maybe to be, we'd have a countdown, we count up. The Beit Hillel opinion is how we do it now, which is on the first day, you light one candle, and then every other day we go up. Okay, so that on the last night, you have 8 candles. By the way, it doesn't even have the opinion that I think most of us do, which is everyone in the house has their own menorah and lights correspondingly upwards like we do today. The Talmud doesn't even really suggest that as an example. So that's law 1 I want to bring up in terms of the order and methodology around how we're lighting, how there's a dispute. Then the rabbis say, Tanu Rabbanan, Ner Chanukah, mitzvah lahanicha al petach beito mibachutz. The Chanukah candles should be placed at the entrance of one's home from the outside. Okay, now why am I dwelling on this? One, I think a lot of people actually just light in their kitchen in general. In Israel, obviously, there's really a practice of lighting outside, and many people have glass boxes that they put their menorah in so that the wind doesn't blow it out. But bare minimum, we should really try to put it by the window. And I want to sit on this because I think this, again, is an example of how the laws of Hanukkah are going to come to express a much larger idea that's underneath the surface here, which is this is a holiday that is meant to be shared and publicized. Think about all the other rituals and things we as Jews do and where we do them. Most of them, and if people have examples that contradict this, put it in the chat because I'm curious. But most of the things we do are at home, right? So, the Seder, for example, we don't have our Seder outdoors so that other people join. Obviously, there's a part of the Seder where we open the door and we invite people in, but there is something private about the Seder. Shabbat, again, you can welcome people in, but it takes place in the synagogue, in the home. Prayers generally happen in a synagogue, which aren't public places. Most of Jewish life is participated in private or insular to the Jewish people. This is one of the rare mitzvot that there needs to be a public element of it, right? Persume nisa is the Hebrew term that's used, which is publicizing the mitzvah. This does not appear in other places, right? This is unique to Hanukkah of expressing the Hanukkah lights to the public, right? And I should say public meaning non-Jews, everyone serves to benefit from it. Okay, so times of danger, somebody just asked. So the law is aware of that, and it says, Im haya dar ba'aliyah menicha b'chalon hatzmucha l'reshus harabim. If you're like me, you live in New York City, and you live in an apartment where you can't put your menorah outside, you can still publicize it by putting it by a window that faces to the street. And then, and this is sad, by the way, this last statement I'm going to read here, because it's going to acknowledge that anti-Semitism and public displays of Jewishness have been something that we have struggled with as a people for nearly 2,000 years. And the Shulchan Aruch says, in times of danger, it's enough to just put it on your table. Meaning, if there is a threat of any sort, by publicly displaying it, you should put it inside, and you don't need to worry about that persume nisa part. And it's and Jeffrey asked, times of danger. How do we kind of understand that, right? Certainly, this last year, I don't know the exact statistics, but anti-Semitic acts are probably dramatically up since October 7th. People's, Hillel houses, synagogues have been visited with anti-Semitic language over the last 2 years. Is this qualified as a time of danger? I don't want to go totally into it now, because I think it really depends on the location and how comfortable people feel. Obviously, I started the class off by that really dramatic picture of a menorah in Nazi Germany. Should that person have done that? I'm not going to weigh in on that. But I think the law certainly is wanting us, as much as we feel comfortable, to have that public display of our Jewishness. And I think a time of danger would really be an extreme time of danger, and wouldn't be inclusive of today. Even though, again, I'm not downplaying what's happening today. There is anti-Semitism, but it wouldn't necessarily be what they're thinking of a time of danger. The next point. They go on to say, and if you have any questions on this, please feel free again to put it in the chat. I love questions. So again, this is the real chunk of the laws that deal with Hanukkah and lighting the candles. Important to know that there's been a dispute in terms of how we light the menorah, even though now it's kind of just automatic. We light up every night adding. There's been a dispute around that through Jewish history, or certainly early on with the House of Hillel and Shammai. And then a unique element of Hanukkah is this public display, right? That we are wanting to show our light to everyone. What this light is, we're going to get to it, but the public display of it is central to, again, understanding that something weird is happening here with Hanukkah that is unusual for it being a rabbinic holiday, where it's saying you gotta like show people that you're celebrating it. There's no other commandment in all of Jewish law that demands that. So again, if you're a careful reader, you would be scratching your head and saying, okay, something important is happening here. Somebody asked, displaying our Jewishness, or rather the importance of freedom or religious practice? Great question, right? Which is, what are we actually expressing when we put a menorah by the window? I think a lot of people have different intentionality when they're doing that, right? Some people feel it's a sign of religious freedom, right? Some people feel like they're publicizing the miracle that happened. Some people feel like they're publicizing the fact that we believe in miracles and that miracles happen today. But I think everyone could be in agreement that putting a menorah by a window is a public display of Jewishness. Regardless of what your intentionality around lighting it is and what you want people to gain from it, having it there is making a statement. In the same way, and by the way, probably the only other example that I can think of right now of a public mitzvah, other than like Chabad doing mitzvahs on the street, would be placing a mezuzah on your front door, right? Clearly identifying yourself as a Jew. By the way, it's interesting that one of the connections we saw was that a poor person has to sell their money for the 4 cups to celebrate Pesach. So there's some strange connection, I think, also for mezuzah and Passover and Hanukkah. All right, let's get to the real crux here of what I'm trying to say here. So I just spent the first 30 minutes trying to show you and make a case that the laws of Hanukkah are actually really unique, and are pointing us to saying this is a really important holiday. Lighting the candles is really important, and displaying them is also really important, and that doesn't exist in other places in Jewish law. So it begs the question of, all right, so what are we trying to express, right? More than just being proud of our Jewishness, what is it that we are trying to show the world by lighting our menorah? And how does that articulate even a larger message of the Jewish people as a whole? So on the debate of whether you should light 8 to 1 or 1 to 8, the Ishbitzer Rebbe, Rabbi Mordechai Yosef of Ishbitz, a really provocative Hasidic master, so much so that early editions of his book were actually burned when they came out, because his teachings often were seen as highly controversial at the time. Let me just make sure I can see this. Okay. So he says, the House of Shammai asserts that we light all 8 on the first night, and remove a candle each night, which represents the refinement as destroying the waste, decreasing and continuing until the Kedusha, holiness, remains completely clarified. So I'll translate the English into English. What the Ishbitz is saying is that when Beit Shammai is saying light 8 to 1, yes, he's saying a logistical practice of how you light the candles, but he's making a larger theological statement, which is, how do we combat evil in the world, right? What's the best method of confronting evil? To him, it's destroying it, right? And he uses this imagery of burning, right? Of burning through all the evil until you're left with one light of unified goodness, right? So again, he's saying Shammai, the 8 to 1 is making a much larger point of how do we confront evil? How do we confront darkness? We just burn through it, right? We eradicate it from the world. The House of Hillel, right, which is the opinion that we follow, unless there are Beit Shammai, which would be fairly interesting. The House of here, the principle is to cause the Kedusha, the holiness, to spread forth at all times. And from this, it follows that the waste will be nullified. So he's saying that the House of Hillel is also making a theological point of how do we confront darkness? How do we confront evil? When you light from 1 to 8, you're ascribing to the methodology of just adding more light into the world. Forget the evil, right? Or I shouldn't say don't forget the evil, but don't even confront it in a way of hand-to-hand combat, right? Just bring more light into the world, and eventually, right, that light will win out, right? So he did a masterful job of saying this really kind of nuanced back and forth of how do we light, is it 1 to 8, 8 to 1, is actually a ancient disagreement about how do we confront darkness in the world. And I think all of us can agree that the world itself, especially the Jewish people right now, post October 7th, find ourselves in this extreme time of darkness where it's almost disorienting to walk through it. And this idea of how do we get through this, the Ishbitz says there's two ways to deal with it. One is to just fight everyone and hope you win out, right? Or we take the Hillel approach, which is forget that, just throw more love and light into the world, and eventually there will be so much of that it will overwhelm the darkness and will be nullified. So the fact that that's how we follow, meaning we follow the practice of Beit Hillel in terms of how we light, I would say we should also follow the theologic approach as well, in the sense of let's focus on how I can myself bring more light into the world rather than what I can't control, which is other people, right? I can control how much light I bring into the world. I can't necessarily figure out and deal with how to take it away other than by bringing it more. And, there's obviously also an idea that you don't lose anything by spreading light, right? You don't take away when you give more light. And so that may also be an underpinning. I'll also share from my teacher, who I think taught for in this time slot, or taught a class for AJU last week, Rabbi Irving Greenberg, Rabbi Yitz Greenberg, in his important book, The Jewish Way. He writes, as long as Hanukah is studied and remembered, Jews will not surrender to the night, right? Meaning Hanukkah is really a holiday that is confronting evil and darkness, right? Evil and darkness. Somebody wrote, it's more important now to create light and kindness within our own Jewish community as opposed to taking on the whole world. Yes, that's exactly right, Peter. And hello, Alex, two of my favorite people. And the law expresses that, right? Instead of dealing with other people, which has its challenges, worry about yourself. The Jewish people, the Jewish community, we by lighting can control that. Put more love, put more light into the world, and by lighting, maybe this year you'll have more intentionality when you light the first night and go up than other years, and it will be a reminder that our job is to add more light. Going back to Yitz Greenberg, the proper response, as Hanukkah teaches, is not to curse the darkness, and I would say that's kind of the Beit Shammai approach, but to light a candle, right? That's how we as Jews confront evil and confront darkness, at least within rabbinic consciousness, is to add more light, not to curse the darkness. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe also signifies that by saying the purpose of Hanukkah candles is to illuminate the darkness. And this is why the time for their lighting is after sunset. So he's saying, again, what's unique to Hanukkah, and again, only maybe shares it with Passover in terms of the essence of the mitzvah is at night versus the day. All other or most other Jewish commandments need to be done during the day. Thinking of Brit Milah as a core mitzvah that follows that idea, is it needs to be dark for a practical reason, which is we want to show the candle, right? And that can only be done when it's dark, is to illuminate darkness. So when we're thinking more abstractly about what it means to light the menorah, what it means to celebrate Hanukkah, what I'm trying to express here is, at its core, it's about bringing more light into the world, which again should, for those who are familiar with the rest of the Bible, you should be thinking, wow, that really sounds very familiar to Isaiah's famous passage about being a light unto the nations, right? And he says, I, the Lord, have called thee in righteousness and will hold thy hand and will keep thee and give thee for the covenant of the people, for a light of the nations. Meaning, we as Jews have a mission, right? We can't just be insular. We have to express something to the world. We have to be a light unto nations. For some reason, people never actually include this, the next verse, which actually specifies exactly what it means to be a light on the nations, to open the blind eyes, to bring out the prisoners from the prison. And I'm thinking this year about the 100 hostages in Gaza, praying that they'll be immediately returned to Israel, and them that sit in the darkness out of the prison house. In other words, caring for the most vulnerable members in our society, right? We as Jews have a mission to teach the world to participate in that. And Rav Kook, right, the first chief rabbi of then Palestine, pre-state Israel, and I'll close with this last passage from Rav Kook. The purely righteous do not complain of the dark, but increase the light. They do not complain of evil, but increase justice. They do not complain of hearsay, but increase faith. They do not complain of ignorance, but increase wisdom. And I really feel this teaching of Rav Kook this year, while, as somebody who reads the newspaper, goes on social media, it's so easy to get caught up in that larger kind of war an expression of frustration, which again is totally valid. What I think Rav Kook is suggesting is, again, focus on what you can do, right? What we can do as a Jewish people. And that's just to bring more light into the world. That is to be more compassionate for those who are suffering, right? To really be there for people when they need us. That's what we need. That's our larger mission. And going back to, and here I'll stop my screen here as we kind of close down, which is I started by going through those intricate details of the law around lighting the Hanukkah candles. And I painfully showed how the rabbis wanted you to take Hanukkah seriously and lighting the candles. And why is that? It's because they believe so much in this idea of pride of being Jewish, but of adding more light into the world and ascribing to this Beit Hillel methodology of don't worry about fighting evil and eradicating darkness. We're going to do that by just adding more light, more love into the world. So with that, I just want to thank everyone for taking the time to learn Torah together. I hope to be invited back and we can learn together more. And it should be a really joy-filled holiday for the Jewish people, and obviously one that also has a redemptive quality as well.
Amen, amen. Rabbi Leaner, thank you so much for being with us today and increasing our light. To all of our learners, thank you for joining us, and may your Hanukkah season be filled with joy, and may you also increase the light in everyone's world around you. So thank you so much, and happy Hanukkah and a happy new year. We'll see you next year for our January 2025 programs.